Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome back to another video lesson. And this week I wanted to tackle flat 9 voicings, dominant 7 flat 9 voicings. This was actually a topic recommended by a friend of mine. He thought I should do this. And I found it an interesting topic simply because it's one of those voicings that I think always leaves a lot of people stumped. It's one of those voicings where I think some people don't really have enough of a vocabulary with, and it's one of the very first voicings that we come across, usually in our journey as jazz musicians and improvising musicians. It's one of the first dominant chords that we see as altered or having a tension. So I think one of the first things that usually happens is we maybe learn, you know, this classic voicing, or this voicing, and call it a day. And for a long time that becomes our vocabulary, and usually our vocabulary tends to oscillate around this voicing, that voicing, or variations of the same voicing. Now, what I want to cover here is a couple of pointers as to what you can do to start maybe augmenting your vocabulary a little bit so you're not stuck repeating the same voicings, and rather you can start using this as a way to apply this to any other chord, basically. So, let's just dive right in. Now, one of the first steps I want to cover is simply think of the chord. Just think of the chord. First off, establish what notes are in the chord. It might seem a simple step, but let's not jump anything in the cue, so to speak. So we've got, if we're thinking of C7 flat 9, we're thinking C, E, G, B flat, and D flat. Now this is important because this kind of contextualizes everything. Sometimes we get too absorbed in a grip. Oh, this is a C7 flat 9 grip, right? And we can't get out of that. The whole point of what I want to talk about today is just really getting out of the box. So, start with that. It might seem trivial, but it's important. The next step is kind of a little more exploratory. Instead of actually jumping right into voicings and things like that, what I would actually suggest is to maybe look at note pairings, right? So, if we think of a flat 9 chord, what are the most important notes of the chord? In any dominant chord, it's usually the 3rd and the 7th. These are our guide tones, but we also have one extra note. We have D flat in this instance for C7 flat 9. Now we can create note pairings. So let's say, in this context, let's say that we have a bass player playing the note C, and we have to somehow imply the chord. Now, we could do E and B flat and just take guide tones, but we're talking about a 7 flat 9 sound here, so we want to be really descript about it. So you can take the following. Either take E and D flat, right? E and D flat, or you can take D flat and B flat. Now, here's the thing. How could we use this? Well, for starters, we can use this if we want to create melodic movement. For example, let's say melodic resolution. So let's say I have this regular flat 9 voicing. I can do suddenly that feels, let me do that again in more of a rhythmic fashion without it kind of getting scuffed in there. 2, 2, 3, 4. That's a beautiful little chord motion, and all I'm doing is using dyads. I've done a video on dyads, so you can go check it out, but I'm being very meticulous about which notes I use for the dyad. I can use either, as I mentioned, flat 9 and flat 7, B flat and D flat in any order, or I can use E natural and D flat. Each one has its own sound. You can also play around with what, what's the word I'm looking for? Not note order, but what structure you choose to use. For example, I can do B flat and D flat as a 6th. I can do it as a 3rd. I can even do it as a 10th. Play around with the idea. I can do E and D flat. I can do it like this. I can come up with all these little ideas. So just doing that can automatically take your 7 flat 9 voicings to a new level. Now you can also put them against the root to get some new sounds. So for example, let's say D flat and B flat. I can put that against a C bass. I get a new voicing. You can do it like this. I can do that with E natural and D flat. I use something like that in the intro. I can do that sound. I've got root, flat 7, flat 9. And what I'm essentially doing is creating like mini shell voicings. Now one thing that's imperative, and this will apply for the next steps going forward, pick the sounds that you like and focus on internalizing those sounds, because this information is, this video is going to be admittedly full of a lot of dense information. And I've done a written Patreon post for anyone who wants to, actually use some of this and have a visual reference. But the idea, take sounds you like, incorporate them into your playing, start moving them about. All right, so now this brings me to my my other point. When you start building some of these voicings, actually, sorry, the next point I wanted to get to, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Invert the chords you already know. Did you know that this chord has some inversions? So, to run it real quick, right? That's one inversion. Some of these are admittedly not the greatest fingerings, but for example, that B flat could be over here and it'll give you a little bit more sparkle in the top end. You would also have, what was the voicing I was thinking of? Ah, right. That's another voicing. This one's actually a beautiful one. Comes from this, you can take that 3-note structure, which actually leads me to my next point. Chunk these sounds. You don't have to play them as full block chords. You can take them as 2 or 3-note cells. For example, just this voicing alone, I can do this, this, all the 3rds. I can take the 6ths. I can take the 9ths and create these little pairings. For example, or can do the same thing with this voicing, right? This is admittedly an odd voicing, so this is great to tackle some of those wider voicings that are maybe a little harder to play. I've done a video on this, I'll link it in the cards. But for example, you don't have to play the entire chord. Now the last point I want to spend some time on, I know this has been a quick video, but I'm wanting to experiment with maybe condensing these videos down as much as I can while still giving you a lot of information to work with. We can finally consider substitutions. Usually a lot of people jump to this step. I think, there's a lot to be explored with the stuff you already know. So, do try and figure out some stuff with these voicings. So or with the information. So let's say we return to our original sound, C, E, G, B flat, D flat. What are the possibilities? Well, there is the standard diminished 7 off the 3rd. That's a very well-known sub, and I think a lot of us have used that. But we can also do triad substitutions. We've got G diminished. That'll give us 5th, flat 7, flat 9 against the key of C, right? We can do E diminished triad. So that'll just give us a bog standard dominant 7 chord. We can also do B flat diminished, which will give us that voicing and variations thereof. And then you can start experimenting with the sound. For example, what if we're going to take G diminished 7, right? I'm just going to do that because it's a sound that's a little interesting. You know, it doesn't have the 3rd. It's not very obvious, but it still gives you that flat 9 sound and a bit more of a mysterious quality. So, what if I did inversions of this G minor triad against a C bass? So there's one, right? There's another, and here's another. That's pretty cool. What if I opened up the triad, spread triads? That's a beautiful voicing. I really like that. It's kind of full. Almost flamenco-ish in a way. I mean, this whole sound is basically flamenco, but what if I did first inversion? So I'd have B flat, what was it? B flat, G, D flat. So, right? There's another one. This one's going to be a stretch, but what if I did second inversion? That's a hard one, and maybe not the most useful sound, but as I said, it's got its own character. As I said, take the sounds you like. Finally, what if I did inversions of the chord itself? So let's say I stack this chord, and I've got... This one has its own inversions and very cool sounds, and these were some of the sounds I was using in the intro. So we've got D flat, B flat, C, G. Again, if that's a big voicing, and understandably you're going to have a lot of a very wide stretch between your middle 2 fingers, break the chord apart. Or you could do it like this. You know, that's a little bit easier. Again, it's not the most friendly voicing in the world. Next inversion. Or this. And then come up with your own chord movements. So here's a cool one that I can leave you with, and that's a very easy one to implement. So I've got B flat, D flat, G, C, and then I've got a melodic line, so C moves to B flat, and then I'm using a substitution again. G diminished 7, or first inversion, E diminished. Melody note goes to A flat, and then you can resolve to F minor. So let's listen to that again. Right? So, I know this video is going to be a little bit of a shorter one, and I might have gone at a rapid clip, but as always, check out some of the sections in this video. You might find yourself surprised that there's new information popping up each time. Go at the pace you need to, and if you would like the written version, please do check out my Patreon. I'm deciding to do that as my extended lesson. I've written it all out there, and I thought it was a good idea because it kind of got my head in a good space for doing this video so that I'm a little more focused. On that note, I'll see you in the next video, and I've got some cool stuff coming up, so hopefully I can share that with you soon. Take care, guys, and until next time.